This is the Venturing Angler Podcast. I'm Tim Harden. In this episode, we're talking with Justin Miller from the Fly Shop about fly fishing the jungle throughout the world, from Bolivia to Brazil to Tanzania and beyond. We're chatting with Justin about all of the destinations he's been to and what he has on his bucket list when it comes to the jungle. Let's chat with Justin. All right, we're here with Justin Miller from the Fly Shop in Redding, California. Justin, welcome to the Venturing Angler Podcast.
Thanks for having me back, brother.
Man, you're back by popular demand, as it's been, and I don't know if I've ever said this on air, but you are single-handedly responsible for making the Venturing Angler Podcast what it is today.
Get a grip.
No, it's true. Back in the day, early on, I would prepare for these things with a little bit of research, some typed out questions, and I would sit there and read the questions and make sure everything was on track. And then one day, I started driving from just south of San Francisco up to Redding to fish with you, and it took, I think, over 7 hours. And I got to your house and I was like, I'm not in the podcasting mood. I'm in a bad mood. You know, had a little bit of whiskey, enjoyed the party. and then hours and hours later, it was the middle of the night. You're like, all right, man, hit record. and we recorded that one. I posted it, and that was everyone's favorite episode. From then on, there's,
freestyle, buddy. We can go
Freestyle.
back and forth all day on this stuff.
Exactly. Like, I feel like you're like Papa Doc and I'm B Rabbit, or vice versa, and we're just
Oh yeah, man.
just kidding. It's not that kind of freestyle, but I like to keep it casual. Anyway,
Love it.
so that's why it's true. That's why you've made it what it is today. So,
Well, thanks, brother.
I want to keep the masses happy and have you on here as much as I can, and not to set expectations too high, but you never disappoint. And so,
Ooh, I'm in a tight spot now. The pressure's on. Trying, Christ's sake, I gotta loosen up.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the jungle. Nothing gets you more stoked than talking about destination and fish and experiences and so forth. So let's dive right in. You're well versed in the jungle, and getting back to the freestyle comment, I didn't even plan where to start. But let's just start off and talk about where you've been.
I mean, I'll start off by saying, it's kind of like the newest thing, right? And like, yeah, you know my thing. I'm a steelheader and a swinger and a cold water guy, but I just like exploring and searching out the new stuff and finding an adventure where it is, and new and fresh, keeps you young and alive. So, the saltwater thing sucked me in there, and I always want to do a couple of that. The jungle thing, I was kind of just like, man, that's just going to be hot in their freshwater fish. And, I started going down there, and the first time I went down there to the Amazon and did the Marie, I was just like, man, there's something going on here. This is pretty sweet. And it's kind of like the third phase of the fly fishing destination deal, right? Like there's freshwater, your trout, steelhead, salmon, whatever. And then there's the salt thing, the bonefish permit thing. And, the world keeps expanding. And the third phase, I think, is the jungle. I think it just is totally separate from freshwater as we think of it. So, yeah, I've been pretty excited to go explore and learn some new spots. And there's so many different places that have been popping up. And you just like, yeah, okay, I want to go on to the next one and see it. So I've been hitting a bunch of them and ticking them off, and I got a bunch more that I'm super stoked for. So, yeah, man, that's kind of how I see the jungle right now. It's the last frontier at the moment.
Yeah, I think almost every podcast you've been on, you're talking about swinging. And I actually one time remember I was heading up to the McLeod, which is, that's where rainbows come from, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
And
all over the world. McLeod River, birth in
exactly.
New Zealand, Chile, Argentina. They all came from Northern California's backyard, man. That's the toughest thing there is.
And I was on my way there. I'm like, hey, you want to go fish the McLeod? And your response was like, those aren't steelhead or something like that. Or like,
yeah, exactly. And that's the crazy thing. I mean, I live in trout heaven. That's why the fly shop is where it is. And I think I've fished the McLeod 3 times in 20 years that I've lived in Redding. And, just when I got the steelhead option, man, I'm always going to choose that,
Yeah, and that's why I brought that up. You're such a swinger, and you're so focused on steelhead that when I hear your enthusiasm for the jungle, it gets my attention.
Yeah.
So
it's new. I mean, I grew up a trout fisherman. I love it. Don't get me wrong. People always are like, man, why you disparage trout? And be like, no, that made me fall in love with fly fishing. That's everybody's first love, right? But, when, I don't know, I talk all the time about the progression of a fisherman. First one, catch a fish, then catch lots of fish, then catch a big fish, then catch a challenging fish, and then teach people how to fish. And so, the steelhead keeps me in big and challenging mode. And, my friends that don't have the luxury of fishing as much as I do, I got no problem showing them the trout because that's the gateway drug, right? But yeah, when you start looking for, to expand your deal and what gets you excited is the new, bigger, more challenging thing that you haven't done yet. That's the jungle at the moment. That's pretty much the scoop.
Yeah. So your intro to the jungle was in Brazil then?
Yeah. Yeah. My first shot down to my first jungle fly fishing ever was Rio Marie, a tributary of the Rio Negro. So we take a float plane out of Manaus, and it's been a super protected river by the local indigenous people there. And Untamed Angling is a great partner of ours, and that of the fly shops, and that became our exclusive. And so we were like, okay, we're all in on this thing, partnering up with them. Let's go figure this thing out. And so I think I was there the 3rd week ever that it existed. Yeah, and we didn't know what to expect or what to think about. There were a bunch of other venues that split time with gear dudes throwing, wood choppers, but all the fly guys were always like, oh man, they're just getting beat up by the gear and whatever. So this thing was going to be fly only, super protected, and they found this giant strain of fish. Like, big peacocks are tough to come by, and they were like, yeah, they're here. And that was the thing. We call it the Rio de Gigantes, the river of giants. And, man, it lives up to its reputation. So we went down there and just single-handed rods, blind casting, 800 casts a day, big streamers, and just, ripping them as hard as you can off the wall. And man, it was something else. It was kind of mind-blowing. Reminded me of striper fishing back home. We fished stripers in the lower Sac here, and it felt like that, catching big bass, covering structure and wall stuff. And yeah, that blew my mind. That was my first taste, and I was like, all right, this is awesome.
Man. So when I think about going to the jungle, it feels to me like fish are just a part of what I'm imagining, right? I'm always imagining the journey there first. What was it like the first time you were entering the jungle?
It was kind of like a magical thing, right? I mean, just growing up, super into fish, super into nature. How many times you see, just nature shows about the Amazon, man. And then Amazon is like the epitome of this giant forested wilderness. It creates so much percentage of the oxygen for the entire planet. You're like, man, this is it. This is as wild as it gets. And so it felt like this pilgrimage. Like I was like, I can't believe I'm finally going to see the Amazon. So I went in there just like starstruck by the place. And then when you get there, it's hard to fathom. When we got in that float plane and you take off, I mean, I've been in a lot of float planes and a lot of choppers, and like terrain changes, you know, and flying over the Amazon rainforest was like a 3-hour flight of this blanket flat canopy of green. It was just like, this thing is huge, man. It was so cool. And then seeing the volume of the river where the Negra, you know, comes together with the main Amazon, it becomes the main Amazon in Manaus. Like seeing the volume of that thing, you're just like, the Mississippi is nothing. The Sac is a joke, right? Like the volume of it is like, man, this thing is power, and yeah, it's just wild. It's beautiful. The first time I got there, is like, it was a pretty special thing to see it firsthand finally.
Yeah, and so those fish were those giant peacock bass, and you've got the butterflies there too. What was
Yeah.
that? What was that first fishing experience like?
Yeah. So, you know, we went in there. The whole thing was, this place has giants. So I went in there with like a steelheader's mentality, where I don't need a pile of fish in the day. And I was just looking for the one giant. Like, okay, y'all said it was giants. Let's go find giants. And so, you know, we'd be banging away, but you'd always, without fail, get into like a school of the butterflies, or borboletas as they call them, and then you just be like, okay, then it's just giddy fun, right? And I mean, you can just catch one after the other. I think we landed 30 fish straight. If one guy hooked a fish, you just leave him on for a second, and then you'd see 3 other ones come up chasing the buddy. The other guy would flop it on top of the fish that was hooked, boom, double. Land the first one, the guy casts on top of the other guy, boom, double, boom, double, boom, boom, like 30 fish, until you were like, I had my fill. We need to move, you know? And then we go look for the giant again. And then it's covering water, being a steelheader, you know, covering a pool methodically. Like you see gaps in the trees on the wall, a little pocket or something, and you're threading the needle under the canopy, trying not to throw it up in the trees. And you know, until you get that one big grab, and all of a sudden you're just strip, and when that sucker came tight, the first big Temensis, the 3-barred guy, the one that makes the cover, you know, the first one I hooked, I wasn't really ready for it, and the guys kind of told me about it. But if you think about it, like in freshwater, as a guide, instinctually, the first time people hook up, right, your reaction is let them run, because they're gonna break the tippet if they don't, right? If they
Right.
what we call gorilla sticking, if they clamp down, pow, he's off. You hook a big fish and you clamp, he's gone. But on these guys, we're fishing 60-pound tests for 20-pound fish, and the last thing you're gonna do is let him run. The guy's like, do not let him run, because he's going to go straight back to structure. He's going to tangle up, and we're never going to get him. So it's the only big fish I've ever hooked, really, where the guides are like, do not let him go. And you just lock it down. Like, the reels are almost worthless there, right? So you're stripping out of this thing. The fish chases you out. You got a pile of slack at your feet. The thing eats. You strip set into his face, and then you feel the weight. Like, it's not a butterfly. And then the thing starts thrashing, and you don't let him go. And, you know, I think I wrote some stuff about it. I tell people about it all the time. Like, I don't know if I've ever heard grown men scream like I have on peacocks when they didn't want to let him run, but the fish said, I'm running anyway. The guys are clamped down, trying to stop them, leather gloves, finger wraps, the whole thing to prevent burns, and the fish just burns through it. And the guys, like, I've seen guys drop rods, like literally scream, just, you know, burn through gloves like nothing. Like, you go through a pair of gloves in one trip, like you're burning through it. And it's just something else. Like to hit something that big, that strong, and at the beginning of the fight when they're the most pissed, and you got to tell them, no, you're not going anywhere, and then see if you can hold on. It's something else. And then the crazy part is too, is when guys like, oh, I can't do it, and they let them run, and the fish goes right into the structure, which is what they didn't want you to do. And you're like, oh, I lost them. And the native guy will just launch off the boat, dive into the pool, swim underwater, and just go start rooting around. Like, is he drowning? Is he stuck under there? And he's down there for, a minute and a half, and he pops up and he's dragged your fish out, untangled him out of this bramble. And yeah, I always enjoy telling the guys that they make the guy go untangle him from the snag bag. You didn't get that fish. That guy did, though. Oh, come on, man. But yeah, it's like a war zone, man. It's something else. Like I said, man, I've never had a freshwater fish that you say, don't let them run. Clamp them down.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's nuts.
So did you get one of them?
Yeah.
How'd that go?
Man, it's one of my favorite stories ever. I might have to launch on some sports stuff. You know how I roll with my Oakland squad, So
Vegas or Oakland? Sorry.
Son,
sorry,
come on.
Sorry.
Oakland forever. But it's a baseball story anyway, so pipe down. So I was fishing with Mitchellak, the owner of the fly shop, and neither of us had a 20-pounder for the week, and we were fishing our last day together, our first day together on the boat. We'd been fishing with all the guys on our crew, and we were like, yeah, I guided Mike a lot in Russia, but he was like, yeah, let's fish together. I was like, oh, awesome. So we went out together. Neither of us landed a giant, and we're fishing all day, and the conditions, the water had risen big time, and I kind of was like, oh, I might have missed my whole shot earlier in the week when the water was more ideal. And I'd lost some big fish, and I'd landed some, 16, 17-pounders, but you go to the Marie to break 20. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so, end of the day or something like that, all right, this might be a little bit of more inside information than anybody needs, but it's the third week of ever, right? And we're trying to market this thing and learn this thing. So Mike brought this bag of tricks with a bunch of different shirts. So every time we catch fish, we change shirts. And it did look like we caught all the fish in the same week, for the catalog and the internet and all that shit. So whatever. So getting toward the end of the day, and I throw it on this like point, and the grass was underwater, and I'm pulling it through, and this bow weight comes off of this thing. And I'm like, that's a lot of water moving. And this thing hoovers it. And it just was great because he came out of grass, not out of roots or, a tree. And the guy skillfully pulled the boat off that point, got us in some big, deep open water. And we get this fish in the net. And Mike's like, it's a big. I'm like, it's a fucking gigantic, man. And he's like, all right. We're going to get some pictures, but we're out in deep water. So the guy's like, all right. So he like putters us over to this nice sandbar and stuff. And we get over there, and Mike's like, and I'm just in awe of this fish. I'm just staring at this fish like, this thing is so awesome. But I'm with a Brazilian guy, right? So, and they're big into the football. Well, Mike goes in his bag of tricks, and he's like, put the shirt on. And he throws me a San Francisco Giants shirt. Man.
Yes.
And I'm Oakland through and through. And he's like, put that thing on for the picture. I'm like, absolutely not. He's like, put that shirt on. I'm like, it's not going to happen, man. He's like, dude, you're doing it. It's for the catalog, blah, blah. I'm like, dude, I will get beat up if I have that picture on in a photo in the catalog. 0% chance. Like, my life's on the line. It's not going to happen. And he starts getting mad. And it dawned on me, and I had the greatest comeback ever until I turned to the Brazilian guide, right? And their arch nemesis in football is Argentina. And I just turned to the guide and I said, hey, if you needed a picture of this fish, would you put on an Argentina jersey to hold that fish? He's like, absolutely not, man. I'd let it go. And I just turned to him, let it go. I'm like, don't let it go. Don't let it go. I'm like, let it go. Okay. You don't have to put on the Giant jersey. But the guide was like, yep, no, I feel your pain, brother. Don't put on the enemy's jersey. And so sure enough, I got to wear a fly fishing shirt for that photo and not a lousy Giant shirt.
That's funny.
Yeah, so that's the picture of my big boy.
What are you catching these big peacock bass on there?
So the rig we use are basically 9 and 10 weight rods. We're throwing big flies, big fish. We got to say no. The reel doesn't get to help us. So, being able to bend that rod out of the cork. So you want that 9 and 10 up there. The wines are these Scientific Angler Titan tapers, which are basically an integrated shooting head. So you pick up a short line and can just really launch, and they're accurate and they deliver a big payload. And we're fishing, weighted streamers, 5-6 inches long. Oftentimes they got the big rattle in there and some lead wraps and stuff. There's a bunch of different color variations. There's a Sardina Cruiser. That's my favorite one of all time. But yeah, just big streamers, blind casting on that intermediate is kind of the jam. I spent a lot more time the last time I went there when I went back for my second time, throwing the popper. So I usually would have a 10 weight with the streamer and the intermediate, and then have my 9 weight ready with the same thing, Scientific Angler Titan taper, but full floating, and then a big aggressive popper, the PSP bubblehead, where when you pop it, it makes noise and water goes through its face and shoots out the top of its blowhole and just makes a ruckus. And especially when the water's high and the fish will be back in the jungle, you can never get a fly back in there. Often it'll pull them out. So in the high water, they'll be like, Miller, you throw the popper, and then the guy on fishing which will throw the streamer, but like I'll throw it back in the trees, in the Malongos, these bushes that they like to live in. They give 3 hard pops, bloop, 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 and then the guy will throw the streamer behind it, and then we'll strip in tandem. And often we can get a fish to come out of the trees where he'd never come out for 2 streamers on the wall, but the popper will pull them out. So I really dig fishing the popper down there. And man, it's ridiculous when you see one of those giant Temensis come out and blast the surface. Ridiculous.
I bet. What's what were, on that trip you were staying on a mothership, or was it still exploratory? Like, what was the situation?
Yeah, so the first time I went down there, it's always a mothership operation. First time I was down there, it was some old school traditional Amazon hardwood deal. But once it got established, I think the 3rd year or something, maybe even the 2nd, Untamed Angling cranked out this boat they call the Untamed Amazon. It's the sickest liveaboard boat I've ever been on my life. So I was just down there fishing that thing in November. The thing's ridiculous. I mean, it's as nice as any lodge I've ever been. It's just this floating luxury hotel. It's something else.
And so that means you're really immersed the entire time. Not that you wouldn't be in a lodge, but you're on the water the whole time.
Well, really, the benefit is, I mean, there's some sweet lodge operations, right? But it's a rainforest, and water comes up and down. And the beauty of being in a mothership operation like that is, if the water rises and if the water's too high where you are, they just crank up the mothership and just go up 50 kilometers, and all of a sudden the water's not as big and high up there, and so they can move the location of the lodge essentially based on the conditions and always keep you in the fresh stuff. And I mean, they have like a ridiculous amount of kilometers on this river, ridiculous. So they can fish for 3 weeks in an area, and then even if the conditions are stable, they can move the boat and fish virgin water, right? And when you're in a stationary location, you're gonna pound out the water as far as the boats can go. That's your range. But this one, you'd be like, okay, we pound out the water close to our range, and do that for 2 weeks, but then let's rest the fish. Let's move the houseboat. Let's move the boat upstream and target totally new fish and rest the ones below. So it's just a really sweet model to be rest your fish, protect your resource, and keep guys in front of aggressive fish that aren't educated. It's just it's the way forward for sure.
That's great. Um, let's talk about other destinations in the Amazon. I know you've been to Bolivia.
Yeah, that one blew my mind. That one was special for me, man. That thing has clear water, freestone, sight casting, big fish, aggressive murderers. They stand out like a sore thumb. There's this giant gold bar in a riffle, and he's just stalking. He's a murderer. And I mean that thing. There's so many correlations to that, and like there were times where if you weren't paying attention to the species of the tree on the bank, you'd be like, I'm on the McCloud, you
Mm.
know? You're boulder hopping, you're hiding behind rocks, like you're getting behind fish so that they can't see you. They got great eyes. So if guys went in clunky, you could just see the fish kind of sulk back and they weren't going to play. So, like, man, it was a technical game. You'd be like, plan your stock, but you could see them from a mile away. You'd be like, okay, there's two fish, you know? And all right, we're gonna go into the forest, not walk the gravel bar along the riverbank. We're gonna come up behind them. We're gonna get one or two shots, and we're gonna get them. And if you planned it, it was just next level. And yeah, that was a cool thing. So they're a migratory fish, and there's another species of fish called a sablo that come by the billions. And so the Dorado will follow them for spawning in the upper river as well as following this food source. And so, yeah, you hit that migration, man. Like the fish aren't leader shy. They're ambush predators on these things. You can see like multiple fish working together, like a wolf pack, and then all of a sudden it's like a bait ball in the ocean, man. Like all these sablo are trying to escape for their lives, and there's three wolves ripping them apart, or tuna or whatever, right? My analogy is, and you're like, all right, put the fly in the middle, give it two strips, you're gonna get smoked. But then there's the technical ones where they're holding and like waiting for one bait fish to come around. And so yeah, man, that place is next level.
Wow. What? So you described it. What Obviously the fishing's different. You're not on a boat, everything like that.
There's a little bit of it. So the lodges are kind of in the middle, right? So if you go downstream, the water gets bigger and bigger. More trips come in. The water gets murkier and murkier. And you can drop down to the lower beach and fish some deep pools with giant fish that you're not sight casting. But if you go upstream, the further you go up, the clearer it gets. And there's two upper beats, at least at the Pluma Lodge. You can go up the two tributaries, which one's the Pluma and one's the Intirizama, and those are gin clear, like full stock. And then the main beat where those two come together, it's kind of like milky. You see 3 or 4 feet deep, but it's kind of glacial looking, blue. So, and deeper. So there's fish hiding that you can't see, but if they're like pushing bait on the wall and like schooling them, you can. And then once the Pluma hits the Secure, you're in big giant water, but there's big giant rewards down there. So it's super diverse.
I meant to ask what gear you were using as far as rods in Brazil. What are you using there, and what are you using in Bolivia?
Not on similar rigs. So in Bolivia, same thing. Like I said in Marie, right? We had Marie is those Titan tapers, intermediates, big streamers, um, and you can have a second rod with poppers. Bolivia, I fished 8s and 9 weights maybe instead of 9s and 10s, but pretty much all floating lines. I had an intermediate for the lower river in the Secure. Same, lots of the same flies. Bolivia, they love this one fly called the Andino Deceiver. It's this like has a spun deer head, like a muddler, but like big, robust, so it pushes water like the fish can feel it moving. And then and then different colors. You know, it's basically black with chartreuse, black with orange, black with whatever. There's a bunch of different ones, and they're sweet. In the upper river, I fish slightly smaller and slightly less aggressive. I found those big andinos didn't do as well in the upper river. We'd go a little bit more tacky. I fished some tarpon flies that were sweet. This Boca Grande that's just like solid chartreuse, like synthetic fiber, no weight, mono eyes. That thing roped them. Major bunker, which looks just like a dang shad. That thing roped them. But almost all floating line there. Less sinking lines. And then the other thing to bring up too with Bolivia is, man, they got a second species, the Paku, which is so underrated, it's crazy. Like literally, if there were no Dorado there, I would go on that trip for a Paku trip. They're so sick. And they're like, you know, guys call them the permit of the jungle. I think it's silly, but they kind of look like it, right? They're these big pie plates, but they're like vegetarians. They have like human teeth, like these square chompers, like a triggerfish or something. And they eat nuts and do this weird stuff, but they're like these giant black pie plates. And often you'll see them like floating, especially in the upper river where it's clear. And so you can tie like these fig flies that look like the figs that fall out of the trees, and they sucked on those nuts. Or these weird little streamers you just super slow retrieve. Or I was throwing these giant dry fly Mormon crickets, like giant foam cricket deals with rubber legs. And man, it was something else. Dorado wants to fight you, right? Like he's a apex predator. So like when you hook the Dorado, they'll jump, they'll go mental, try to kick your butt. But they usually don't take a bunch of line. They just are really crazy right there, right? But the Paku, you know, you throw that cricket on them, and they track it back like there's a trout on a dry in a spring creek, and you're like, oh, he's gonna do it, and then he kind of lifts to the surface, just gives a little suck in. You see the fly disappear as soon as he closes his mouth, you know. Give them a solid strip set. And I can't tell you how many times I strip set at the same time they were shaking their head and break the sucker off. And if you didn't pop them off straight away, he'd do a 100-yarder in your back and shred. Go way further than Dorado. Those things were awesome, man. I would never pass a shot on a Paku. If there's 3 Dorado in the pool, you know, and like 2 Paku floating, like give me the Paku rod. There'll be Dorado in the next pool.
And is it true that they're just waiting underneath bushes and trees to eat nuts and fruit?
Yeah. I mean, not all the time, right? So, like, I saw plenty. They were, like, just floating in the middle of a pristine pool, and you'd see 3 Dorado, you know, 1 at the head, like, being ambush predators. But then there's just, like, 3 Paku floating in the middle. And the guy's like, what do you want to do? I'm like, come on, give me a Paku, man. I've landed way less of them. The Dorado, you know, you're getting them. You're targeting them. So, like, when the Paku would come back, let's do that. And that's when we throw crickets and weird stuff at them. But more than once, we'd be cruising the river, and there'd be, like, a seam off a rock, and you wouldn't even see any Paku. But you just hear this, like, blunk, blunk, blunk. And then you'd look up, and there's a bunch of freaking monkeys in the tree, and they're chewing on these nuts. I don't know if they were figs or not, whatever. But they're dropping half the fruit, and it's plunk, plunk, plunk in the river on the seam next to this rock. The guy's like, oh, hold up. We're fishing this thing. And then we throw nut flies down deep, and it was, you know, it was like kind of like nymphing. It's not like we were, you know, had bobbers or something, but you take a weighted nut fly, throw it in the seam high, and just high stick it down through the thing, let it suck down. And, you know, once you got below that where those nuts were splashing in, that thing would come tight back. Whoa, there he is. Like, yeah, absolutely a symbiotic relationship, man. Like, they would sit under those trees and wait for the monkeys to come feed. And when the monkeys started dropping fruit, they were on the bite.
So these Paku, people call them, you know, permit of the jungle or whatever. That's mostly because of their physique. It's similar to a permit, but they're darker color.
Yeah, I think it's just because their shape. If If they were shaped different, I don't think anybody would make the correlation to a permit. But they're badass, none the same, just like a permit.
How big do those things get down there?
Proper big, man. Like we saw fish over 20.
Yeah. What about the Dorado?
Those things can get tanked in the Bolivian jungle. I mean, you know, I think our biggest fish when I was down there seeing them, you know, we got some 25s, which are so studly. But especially as a steelheader, man, that's like the top of the world, right? And we got it done in our 6 days being there. But you know, there's some pictures from down there that are 35-pound fish. You know, the outliers are gnarly.
You described the sablo, but the first time someone described sablo to me, like I heard it, yeah, they're coming up by the billions or whatever. But then I saw a video and it changed everything as far as.
Dude, I love that video, that little like 3-minute thing.
Yeah.
Dude.
For those who can't see a sablo and fully understand, I mean, you described it to some degree, but like, I mean, it is. I haven't seen them in person, but it really is. They're filling the river, and Dorado.
It's a mass migration.
Dorado lose their minds, even bank themselves and die on the beach to try to kill these things. Yeah,
they push them into the wall. You know, like fishing stripers on a riprap or something like that. They'll hurt them and use the wall as a breaker. But yeah, if they take the charge after them and overcommit, yeah, you'll see them flop off of dry land to get back into water. And yeah, I mean, but it's gnarly. And that's the thing is like when you're on the water, you see them on the edges, but that aerial perspective looking down on the river from bird's eye view, like son, there's like black rails on both sides of the river, this march of biomass. And okay, you know, the tribe lives on those. You know, like that's the thing is they're so important to the ecosystem, right? Like the Dorado do their thing based on that. They follow that trail of food, and the people that live there are the same. The guides have these bows and arrows in the boat every day. And the guy will be like, "Can I fish?" Be like, "Absolutely." And he'll stand on the front of a dugout canoe with a bow and arrow with a I mean, they're badass, man. They're like 3-foot arrows, and they got macaw fletchings, like the parrot fletchings feathers on the back of the arrow, and they're like wood carved points with barbs. And the boys are just up there, and they'll shoot 4 or 5 sablo with their bow and arrow, throw them in the boat for dinner. You're like, man, that's, you know, the whole world lives on sablo up that high in the Amazon. It's bitching.
And this is a lodge-based destination too. I mean, the other one's a mothership, but this is a ground-based lodge.
This is a fixed location. Yep. They got a couple lodges, Security and Puma, real comfortable. They got some other ones that are out camps, Agua Negra, that are a little more rustic and move around. But yeah, they got a bunch of different little cubby holes on a bunch of different little tribs, and there's fish running all of them. So this year they're starting a new thing. Like we can only get so far with our boats. You know, these dugout canoes, the boys are pulling them up through riffles and these freestones like badass. We got engines for the lower river and bigger boats, but this year to get to some of the more remote stuff, like the guys could see good water that we couldn't access, and this year they're starting a helicopter operation to pop in and pop out of some real cutty stuff too. So yeah. Every little vein of fresh water up there has a puss of giant fish chasing bait. It's pretty sweet.
And from what it looks like, you're really, it probably feels like you're really exploring because you're pushing your way upstream, seeing what's around the next bend, exploring pools.
Big time, man. I've been in some wild places, and that was pretty stinking wild. You know, I mean, the native guys that live in that village are in your boat every day. You know, you're just communicating with, you know, facial expressions and sign language and just reading each other's excitement. And those guys are in the boat with you, and they know that river. They've lived on that river. They grew up on that river, and they're like, you listen and follow them. And then you got the awesome Argentine dudes that like know fly fishing, right? Like they know everything. Same thing in in Brazil and on all of Untamed stuff, they always incorporate the local tribes. Like, we're not here to take over your resource. Like, we want to work together and improve your deal, and make these fish more worth more alive than dead. So they always incorporate the tribes, and that's one of my favorite things of fishing down there with the Untamed crew, is that we get to interact with those guys and just have so much fun. It's just it's special, man.
When you're
I think I got sidetracked on that one.
I've followed it.
Okay. I don't remember the question. I just ended with the boys being badasses.
No, that's what
I think we started with them just eating sablo and shooting arrows off the boat. I mean, and they're constantly doing that too. Like, at the end of the evening, like, all these cormorants are flying down the river, right? These fish-eating ducks. And, I hunt ducks. You wouldn't ever think about a cormorant. The boys get all crazy birdie and start grabbing slingshots and just firing rocks in the air trying to knock out cormorants. And they knock one down, boy, the boat's going to stop. We're going to go find that bird. And, like, the whole thing is just like, yeah, man. I heard a story. They got this crazy, like, this thing called a tapir. It's this giant mammal. And can you hear me?
Yeah, and this is perfect because I was just about to ask you about critters. So yeah, go on.
There's a bunch of critters down there. So this tapir is this weird looking, like, pig, anteater, elephant, crazy, like 300-pound mammal, that's stomping around in there. And man, that's a lot of protein, right? And I heard this one story where we'd see them and the boys would point them out, blah, 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 whatever. They don't have an opportunity. They're working, blah, blah, blah. But I guess they were coming back to the lodge one time and they just came into a pool and there was a tapir swimming across the river right as the boat was coming up to it. And the guy, like, without hesitation, just pulls a machete and just runs down the gunnel and full, like, dive jumps off and just machetes the back of this thing's neck. And the guys in the boat are like, okay, I guess we're just going to sit here and watch him clean a tapir and be late for dinner. They're like, yeah, no, taking this thing to my family. I'm like, that stuff right there, man, like, I live for that.
Wow.
Who cares if you caught fish that day if you just saw a dude just go full animal on a tapir like that?
Did you guys get to eat any of the stuff that was encountered?
No. Obviously, they got, it's so nice. I mean, that was the thing. We'd talk to them and then be like, yeah, we got, like, some fancy hors d'oeuvres and, some, wine-based sauce on a steak. And they're like, that's ridiculous. We eat sablo on a fire. Like, your stuff's nasty. And, it was crazy. They were like, dude, we don't eat that stuff. It doesn't even look good. And they're just, like, living off the land, like, properly getting it done. It was cool.
That's cool.
Like, in a fully sustainable way. That's the thing, like fully connected, not, they're not taking out the apex predators. They don't mess with Dorado. Like, they hold them in super high regard. They're like, yeah, no, we eat the sablo just like the Dorado. We're equals. And it was just the culture part and being immersed in that with them was awesome.
That's how you feel about bears.
Always, man. For sure, dude. Don't mess with apex predators.
Oh,
that's why I don't get eaten when they try to run up on me.
You've had plenty of chances to be eaten, so that you might be right about that.
Yeah, no, I'd rather keep my karma intact and be like, yeah, no, this isn't the droid we're looking for.
So let's get on the plane. Where are we heading next?
Shoot, any of them. So this year, I did Bolivia, did the Peacocks. After the Peacocks this year, we went and did the Arapaima.
That's right.
Level.
Yeah, so that's Brazil.
Melted my mind. And then when we got home, we were like, dude, we got to pick the next one. So next fall, as soon as I get home from Russia, me and my crew are going to go check out the Pyara, the vampire fish at Xingu. And then we got to go back for some more Arapaima. And then right before the COVID crushed us, man. I got down to Africa, did the tiger fish. That's a whole nother jungle you got to mess with, is in Africa. You know what I mean? The Amazon's one thing, but the Congo's another.
Let's get
Tanzania's on the other side, but I mean, there's so much stuff in that latitude of freshwater that's gnarly, man.
let's
Like I'm just
explore.
pumped.
Let's talk about the Arapaima.
Yeah,
We've got two more. Yeah, we've got two more Brazil destinations to touch to to tackle. Then let's head over to Africa. So I forgot that you did the Arapaima trip. What was that like?
I mean that one. I was pumped for that one. We were super pumped for that one. We were just like, come on, man! It's the biggest freshwater scaled fish in the world. Like, let's go, let's fight. And I didn't know what the heck I was expecting. You know, like some big slug or something, but it was nuts, man. Like they were just nuts. They're so hard. They're so strong. And the thing is they do this, they got to do this air breathing gulping thing. And you hear about it, right? You're like, okay, yeah, I get it. They roll on the surface and they got to suck in air off the top. And then they go hunt on the bottom. But I didn't know much more than that. I didn't know if it was a fast strip and they were aggressive or what the hell. And they kind of blew my mind, man. So like I was like, okay, we'll see a couple flop on the surface. We get out there the first morning. I saw 1,000 fish break the surface. So like you're surrounded. There's 100 before lunch that broke the surface within casting range.
No kidding.
But you can't cast to them. So like they come up the gulp and then they go back down to the bottom and they're like 25, 30 feet deep. So we're fishing same stuff. Well, not same stuff. So for them, I mean, we're looking for giants. Two of the guys on my trip landed fish over 330 centimeters. They're 7.5 feet long, like 300-pound fish. No, I'm sorry, 230 centimeters, 7.5 feet long, like 305-pound fish. Like stupid. Giant. And so you're running 12 weight rods, the same stuff you would fish for freaking marlin, right? 200-pound tarpon. So they're throwing that, but we're fishing 35 feet of T14, the Scientific Angler Custom Tip Express, uncut. And so you're just launching it as far as you can and then counting to 25.
No way.
Dude, you like let this thing sink to the bottom. And then it's like a finger crawl. The guys are like, these things won't move 2 feet for a fly. Like they sit on the bottom like they don't exist, right? And they wait for a fish to come within inches and then they inhale. So like you're seeing fish like everywhere. You're like, dude, there's 40 fish under the boat right now. But you can cast all day and not get a bite, right? Like, unless you just luckily, and the patience and like focus it took for me to like leave the fly on the bottom. Like, if you started chatting with the guides and stuff, you'd like instinctually speed up your strip, and you knew you were out of the game. Like, it took me so much to keep my head focused on this, like, it would take 3 seconds for me to get from my reel to my hip on the strip. Like super slow. Reach back to the reel, super slow. I could smoke a whole damn cigarette from the time the fly hit the water until I got it back to cast again. It was like 6 minutes.
How
I could burn a whole dart.
how do you know if one ate?
Oh, like you're just, nothing's happening. You're just doing this slow, and then you just feel the suction. You're just like, oh. Like you got sucked in, and then you'd be like, hit it as hard as you can, like a giant tarpon, right? So we're fishing like 6/0 TMCO 600 SPs, like the sharpest, strongest, hardest hook in the arsenal, and you just keep going. And the guys are like, if you break them off on the set, I'll be happy. You can't hit them hard enough. We're running 80-pound fluorocarbon for these things, man. And the biggest one I hooked, I know it was the biggest one I hooked. In my mind, it was the biggest one I hooked. It might have been a minnow. Shit, I never saw it. But I'd missed a few, I'd done some mistakes and that, and man, I hit him so hard. It took me 3 strips before that fly line turned into piano wire. And then I did a rod set on my right, and I broke the 80-pound test. Oh, man, I almost threw up. I was like, that was the one. But yeah, so if you do connect, like I jumped a couple big ones, and that's the crazy thing. I landed a couple that were 100 pounds, and the guys are like, yeah, that's nice. You know, like minnows, 100 pounders are minnows. Like the wrap your head around that is crazy. Where you're like, I can't believe I didn't get it done, but I got 100 pounds, and it's just nuts. But once you hook them, you're like, okay, you come tight. You're like, all right, he's set, he's on. And then they come up, and then they come 30 feet to the surface and start tail walking and dancing like full out of the water. You're like, dude, how can something that big get up like that? And then you pull them in. Once you get them in, it's like a dinosaur, right? It's a 1,000,000-year-old fish, man.
So this is a thing that won't move to eat very much, but then it's somehow able to put more than 300 pounds out of the water like that.
Yeah, exactly, man. Why don't you just rush stuff because you can? Because they're all tail, right? Like, I never really get that dynamic. We should talk to some freaking, scientist with aerodynamics or something. How like those guys with the thin V tails have speed bursts, and this guy's like this huge paddle. He can move so much water and kick so hard, and doesn't. But he can get out of the water, and a permit can't.
Yeah, and you talked about setting the hook. They have a real hard mouth, right?
Yeah, super hard, just like a tarpon. Yeah, you gotta hit them with all you got. Like plenty of times, you'd set 3 times, bang, 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 like be hard, and then they're just off. And you'd be like, what'd I do wrong? And the guy's like, nothing. You just hit them in the hard palate. Like, you just got to get lucky. They got 2 soft spots in the roof of their mouth. They got the scissors. And if you don't hit them there, it ain't sticking.
And these are fish that are compared to tarpon in several ways. One is they kind of look like tarpon. They've got big scales, except they're green, sometimes with some reddish tips. Not always.
Yeah. I mean, there's a big tarpon. You look to them, they got that, that big mandible that opens up when their mouth goes. Not quite like megalops, but
and they come up for air too.
No, there's a big feeling of similarity there, but the tail. Once you see the whole body and the tail, you're like, that's like nothing else.
Yeah,
that was designed here and didn't move. You know what I mean? Like, the arowana is in that fishery too, and arowana are badass. But I mean, those are the only 2 that we target that are like that, with that crazy snaky deal that doesn't have like a pronounced tail. They look like an eel almost. But yeah, the Arapaima have those olive scales, even dark to blacks, but then like they're like around it are these like red highlights, and they're just the coolest looking thing.
Do you know much about the science behind their heads?
I mean, it's like a friggin' redwood log. I don't know the science behind it, but I'll tell you 2 stories of brutality. So I saw 2 dudes take it like hard. So when you get them in, if they're a serious one, you can't get them in the boat. You can't pull them in the boat. If you did, you'd crush their guts in the boat, right? So the boys will be like, okay, let's try to find a place that we can pull them up on the beach, but we'll hop in the water in a foot of water, and we'll get in the water, and we'll kind of like try to lift them up and not get eaten by a friggin' caiman, And so, but the head guy will always take the head. And so he puts on Kevlar gloves. They got more than a rasp like a tarpon, but like similar, right? Like small, grady teeth. And so if you didn't have gloves, you're just going to rip your hand off, like shred the skin off, not like cut it off like a giant barracuda or a shark would, right? And so put on the Kevlar gloves, and they put 1 thumb in each scissor on each side at the mandibles, and like then just like torque your fingers under his jaw to like lock that sucker down. And they're like, wear him out for me. Please make him tired first, you know? And then the native dude always grabs the tail, and he's doing the same thing, like trying to hold this thing down. And then, you know, our soft asses get in the middle and like, hey, look what I did, and try to hold this thing up. But like before they let you do that, they'd be like, let's see if this guy's toast or in nice and calm yet. And we got 2 videos. The first one, this thing thrashed when they were coming in and trying to get it, and it popped the native dude in the knee, and on the side of the knee, buckled him up, dude. Like buckled him up. And we're like, oh, that looked like it hurt. He had to limp it off for like, you know, a bunch of time before, you know, he was like, okay, I'll take the tail. Then the other one, my buddy, was the biggest fish we got. This, you know, what was it, like 233 centimeters, biggest fish. It's like 8 centimeters under the record. And they were going in for it. And the head guide, Rafa, he's going to kill me for telling that story, but it's a bitchin' video. And he's a soldier. He's like an MMA fighter. Like, I'd have died. I'll give him that. So, Rafa, shout out, brother. You took it like a savage. But this thing throws its head and catches him right dead center of the chest.
Oh.
And it just like, boom. You can just hear it, see it, and it just folds up. And you're like, oh no, dude. And like he like goes over to the boat, no wind, and just sits there for 15 seconds, you know, 20 seconds, and just like getting his shit together. And like, holy buckets, that thing gave him a blast, eh? Like I said, I'd have been done. Like, I'm done. I'm not going back in. Fucking cut it off. I'm done with your picture. Rafa stands up straight, takes 2 big breaths, and he says, now it's personal. And he walks right back up in there and grabbed that thing by the chops. All right, get in here for this picture. Big heave ho, got it up. We got the sick hero shot. I was like, man, you're a beast. Guy's savage. Yeah, I love it. But this thing just like a redwood trunk right to his chest, boom, down.
That's fun.
And a bunch of the fish would be like, just watch your face. If you're holding the thing, if this thing goes and it hits you in the grill, you're toast, man. I mean, they're a force to be reckoned with. We'll get to Africa. I want one of those Nile Perch. That might be the only other freshwater fish on the planet that can, you know, match up Arapaima for just savagery of, you know, size and just, you know, just being a freaking utter savage, man, a beast.
I know someone who's fishing for them at this very moment.
Stop, dude.
Yeah.
I want one.
Before we move on to...
Wait, Arapaima or Nile Perch?
Nile Perch.
Yeah. Man, that's like top of my list in freshwater. Top.
But the arowana, when you said there's nothing like an Arapaima, arawana's a little bit similar in the profile. Their mouths are different. They've got these weird.
Yeah. No, they got more of a tarpony face to them with that,
true. True.
That weird. They look way more tarpony in the face, but their body is Arapaima-ish. But they top out like, I don't know, 6-8 pounds, right? Like those are hogs, but and so like it's one of those things where the guys are like, we should really spend some time on this, and you're like, I want an Arapaima, but you just like, all right, dude, go spend some time on these things, and then you just be like, in the exact same place you were in the middle of the channel fishing these giant sink tips for these giant Arapaima, they just go to the same place and hug the wall. And all the trees that were down, like any structure on the bank, you'd sight casted all these arowana, man, and they're like on the surface, full floating line. And same thing like the Paku, we were throwing that giant stinking Mormon cricket dry fly, man. And if you let them put it in, same thing, they would just come up like a big, big trout under a dry, look at it, and be like, he's going to take it, suck it in, pop, and they just jump, go nuts. It was so cool, man. And like target rich, like you just go bang. So if you're just like, that's when we did it. If you just go like 6 hours and you've seen 1,000 fish roll, Arapaima roll within casting distance, and you haven't got a bite, and you're like focused on this slow strip, and not breaking your concentration, and it's hotter than bejesus, and you're like, this is brutal, dude, and my mind is melting. I'm about to lose my shit. They'd be like, let's go get an arowana. Like, absolutely. And you just like can relax, go bang some fish on the dry, you know, like, okay, I'm recharged. Let's go look for the stinking monster again.
And the crazy thing is if it weren't for Arapaima, these fish are pretty big in their own right. They're just seen as like the small species there.
Yeah, I mean that's the plight of so many fish, right?
It. By the way, I forgot. I asked about the head. I don't know if this is true. I did see a video, so I guess it's almost true.
I mean, everything you see on the internet is true.
that juvenile or baby Arapaima can feed. They get like a milky nutrient that comes out of the head of the mother Arapaima, or maybe not even just the mother, through the glands on their heads.
Really?
Yeah. And
New to me, buddy. I'm gonna have to call Rafa and be like, "Is Harden talking nonsense or what?"
Maybe. I mean, if I'm wrong, like I just came up with the craziest crap ever. But
no, I don't think so. I bet it's true. I mean,
I would be.
Those things they're dinosaurs, man. The way they live and act, nothing would surprise me about them that they do it different than everybody else.
That would be.
That's cool.
That'd be epically wrong. You'd be like, next time you come on the podcast, be like, hey, remember that time you described the baby?
Oh yeah, make sure you don't edit that out. I'm gonna Google it. And be like, dude, you're wrong, and then we're still leaving it in. And if you're right, you'd be like, yeah, boy.
Oh man! And then the other thing, this is some sort of Arapaima reserve you're fishing, right?
Yeah. This thing is like this national park, and this is a trippy thing. So like, we did it in tandem with the Marie, and the Marie's like canopy is so thick and stuff, you don't see any critters there. There's a bunch of birds. You know, you got the pink dolphins in the water, but you don't see the monkeys. You don't see not much. And then you go back. When you're flying out of the Marie, they stop in Tepe, and then you go up this different arm, blah, 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 and you get to this national park. And this thing was like alive. It's what I imagined the Amazon as. And like, I don't really get why I think because the Marie is so thick, I don't know, but like this national park, man, like monkeys everywhere, crazy jaguar sightings, crocodiles, these caimans up the wazoo, just place is alive. And they got this monkey. The reason they made it a national park, they got this crazy monkey. Oh God, I hope I don't blow it, but I think it's kind of like the uakari. And this dude, I didn't even know this thing existed, man, but we saw it. And it's like, so it's this big monkey. He's super puffy, like super thick coat, bleach white, totally bald head, not just his face, his whole stinking head. And he looks like Skeletor, dude, just like fluorescent red, bald, crazy looking face, bleach white fur, and this giant, bushy, short white tail. Like, he ain't swinging from it. Like, this thing looks so out of place, and they're so cool. And I researched them when I got home. I guess there's a couple species, but, like, they're kind of, like, they stand out the most. Other ones are, like, different colors or whatever. But, yeah, they made that national park to protect this monkey that, like, only lives in that region, is totally isolated. But it was sick, man. But we saw, like, I mean, every morning you're serenaded by howler monkeys just going crazy in the distance. Spider monkeys are jumping between trees. Like I said, crocs everywhere, like so many fish, just different species floating around under the boats. It was nuts, man. Really special place.
That sounds amazing. And then when you mentioned where you're going next, we'll get to that at the end. Let's go to Africa.
All right.
So, where have you fished in Africa in the jungle?
So I'd been messing with the Amazon. Was like, okay, I really like the jungle freshwater fishing. It's super unique, blah, blah, blah. And we knew these guys, these outfitters, African Waters. I've been following them for years. They were doing some seriously cutting edge stuff in jungles that were like, man, that's off our radar. You know, like there's some saltwater stuff. Obviously, the Seychelles we were messing with and everything over there, but like mainland Africa jungle stuff, man, these are the only guys doing it. And I was really interested and wanted to get one, but we just hadn't. And so they come to do a little tour of the West Coast, and they came through. They did a presentation for our club, and we kind of, I took care of them. Took them to Mexican food. They ate their first tacos and stuff with me. I was like, yeah, all right. But got to talking with them, and I was like, man, I want this thing in our catalog. I want to do this. Like, how are we gonna work together? And they're like, we have an opening next week. I'm like, what? Come on, man. I mean, it's a little short notice. I don't know if the boss will go for that. And we did that show and everything. And they did their presentation for our local fly fishing club. And the boss was there. And after the show, we were like, the boss is like, yeah, we really want to work with you. That place sounds awesome. That's, the next jungle. And so we like presented it right there on the spot. We're like, we could plan a trip for next year, and then it might be in the next year's catalog. So like 2 years out, we'd start making sales. Or I could just go next week, and we're writing the catalog right now. We could have it, in the catalog in 2 months and start working with these dudes. I said, what? The tickets are gonna be expensive. And I just expedited it on my phone right there. But yep, no, they're cheap. It's like, all right, go.
Nice.
So like, from the day I met those guys, I was in Africa with them chasing tiger fish in Tanzania. 6 days later, man, and I came home blown away, like different world, man. Like, I've done a lot of stuff. That was my first time in mainland Africa, and it just, all the stories. You're just like, oh my god, that's mind melting. We saw Cape buffaloes, lions. I mean, we're dodging hippos while we're fishing.
No way.
Just, like mind-melting stuff. And then the fish were out of control. They look like striped bass with 3-inch like rows of daggers for a mouth. You're like, why? That's way overkill, dude. Nobody else needs that. It's all for show. But they were just savages, man. And they pull like nothing. Like, it was good. We were hooking lots of fish, big fish every day. It was nuts.
So this sounds like, the hippos alone, they bump a boat, you're in trouble, right?
Yeah. No, they got some stories. They told us some stories. I like stories like that. And the boys were like, I can't believe you fish around grizzly bears. But like, dude, we just dodged 3 hippos. What are you talking about? I always love that where guys are super comfortable with their predator, but like uncomfortable with the other. So I was tripping on hippos, and they were like, nah, bro, I'm over Russia, But the thing is lots of the like families of hippos. The guys would be like, okay, we're gonna fish this pool. We can see the hippos. You'll see them get pissed, and then we're going to charge them. We're going to stay to the outside. It's normal. Let's just stay low on the boat, but, super predictable. But they were like, yeah, but then there's like these solo males that'll come out of nowhere, and those will freak us out and have caused issues, blah, blah, blah. But I kind of like that, having something that's always sitting there like, bro, this isn't your spot.
What was the fishing like? What I think you're using pretty heavy lines there to similar gear to maybe.
Yeah. Not like similar gear to Dorado, and the guys hated hearing that. Obviously, like they're that was the new stuff. But lots of the guys that have been to Somalia and stuff go over and like, this is a lot like golden Dorado fishing in Bolivia, and they're like, get angry. So I don't want to even make that comparison because they'll kill me. But it was, similar gear, similar tactics. You're banging big streamers, sink tips. But I ended up actually fishing a bunch of floating lines and poppers towards the end of the week. Like, we were banging them. I had some really good fish under my belt, and I was just like, hey, poppers? Like, yeah, but you got to put in the time. I'm like, well, let's put in the time. Like, we got a few. And so we started fishing poppers, full floating lines, and got some giant fish to smoke them off the surface. Like, yeah, they had it all, man. They're nuts. The big one thing I noticed was like 8, 10, 12-pound fish, were like, okay, just like a steelhead or something, but okay, it's a little bigger, it's a little bigger, it's a little bigger. Once you cross the 15-pound mark, it became a different animal, like you couldn't tell it what to do. It was gonna smoke you. And I mean, you're just scared. You're like, come on. And yeah, we hooked some really big ones, and they got a really hard mouth too. So you set on them really hard, and the boys like, I don't understand this one for a second, but the boys hated them being on the reel. So like, don't put them on the reel. And I don't know what happens. Like, guys soften up when they're on the reel or something. But he was like, just keep stripping them tight, and like, I don't know. It was weird. Yeah, you had to hammer them hard and just like keep finger fighting them there. Like, do not like try to run up the line and put them on the reel. Okay, whatever you say, boss.
When you land one, they try to bite you or anything?
Nah. They were chill, like I'm just like a Dorado and a bunch of other stuff that could zap you, but that place is full of crocs, man, full of crocs, and the guides were not playing. They were like, same thing with the Arapaima at Paku. They would like splash water, like make sure, kick everything out. But a couple of picks, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go on the deep side and like be down in the water of the fish. I'm like, come on, Miller, I don't like it. But come on, go fast. And it's probably like a dumb decision on my part, but you could tell they're stressed out if we were taking a picture submerged in the water. And then what really drove that home for me, we went off the reservation, literally outside of this private concession. The thing's like super protected. There's some sick water above, but there's a bunch of like villages and people up there because it's no longer this private concession, right? And so we're waving at people going by their little villages and stuff. And I swear I saw probably 4 people that were amputees, no legs, no arms. And every single lady I saw pulling water from the river had like a 5-gallon bucket 5 yards away from her. She had a 5-yard bamboo stick with a milk jug like screwed onto the bamboo stick, and she'd stand 5 yards away from the water, and she'd dunk the milk bucket on the stick, swing it over, pour it in the bucket, dunk it, swing it over. She wasn't getting near the water. And that's when I was like, yeah, man, I don't know, maybe we shouldn't be taking pictures underwater.
Oh man.
Yeah, no, like real stuff. They're like, nah, dudes get eaten around here. I'm like, oh, okay. Listen to your guide.
Yeah. So you mentioned, I think you mentioned Jingu on the podcast. Well, I don't want to just start talking for you. What's next? You mentioned Nile Perch too.
Yeah. So that's the next one. So got home. The guys that are charging with me on all this jungle stuff right now, that's kind of the next one. They're like, okay, what's the next weird jungle thing we got to go wrestle with? And that's what we decided for next year. So next fall, we're going to go do the Jingu, the vampire pyara fish. I mean, they just look gnarly, right?
Yeah, big toothy fish. In this case, unlike.
Well, they just have 2.
Yeah, that's
so they have these like 2 vampire things on their bottom jaw. and they go through their skull. They go through the upper jaw and protrude out like the top. Like, they don't go outside their face. Like, they drill through the guy's forehead. Like, they're gnarly, man. Like 4 inches. Same thing like the tigers kind of like, dude, that thing's all for show.
Yeah.
What possible good could that do? But I mean, if you swim next to the guy, you'd be like, nah, bro, we're good. I don't want to fight.
And these things with you fish big streamers, they come in, they go for the kill shot first, and then they come back around for the eat, right? If it's, and I guess not with the streamer.
I mean, I think a lot of the predators do that, right? You'll see the Dorado do that, the tigers do that. I mean, you just see. I've seen GTs do that, you know, where the second strike's going to be the one, right? You just keep stripping. Like, I'm not dead yet. And they'll be like, all right, I'm going to finish you off. But, yeah.
And so those teeth are designed really to kill, and then they can eat after that.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's another thing to research. But can you imagine if you, like, actually use that tooth and you just, like, skewered something? Like, okay, so, all right, you're eating our streamer that's 5 inches long, right? Or you took a 5-inch fish and you actually hit that thing, like, through them. How are you going to get it off that tooth?
Yeah, how does it
now it's just stuck.
How does it even chew it?
Yeah, now it's just stuck on the tooth. You're like, all right. I have no idea, man. But it doesn't seem that functional. I think it's for show.
I'm pretty positive, though, that they do not feed their young through their heads.
Well, hell. You're the one that brought up that theory. Now I'll buy it for anything.
And by the way, before we forget, the Jingu's in Brazil, and one of the appealing things about this destination in particular is that the fish there are enormous.
Yeah, they got the big ones there. I mean, it's the only place where that's the main target, right? So the Payara, as far as I know, they're kind of weird. Where, like I said, when we're flying over the Amazon, it's just like this flat expanse, right? Like, there's not that much gradient. The river is very slow, and that's a big flat bench. It's not coming down out of the mountains. The Bolivia is coming off the backside of the Andes, right? So you have high gradient, freestone, boulders, blah, blah, blah. Lots of the jungle stuff is down, you know, in the Amazon bits is very low gradient in this, like, flat canopy. But on that drainage, they have this like granite hard rock, and the Payara love being in that, like, shelf water and that, like, broken water with, you know, it comes over shallow granite and then has a deep plunge pool and just ambush stuff. And so you'll find them in certain places. Be like, yeah, okay, you know, there's a whole bunch of peacock water that's just glass, and you're fishing structure and all that. But there's one random, feature of a shelf in the river, and be like, okay, there's Payara here, right? But you beat it up because it's the only place to find them, and the guides want to take you there every week, blah blah blah. This thing is totally targets them only. So all it is this sheet granite, just like really crazy, just really unique. I mean, I haven't been there yet. I'm super excited, but you look at it on Google Earth, and yeah, it's just this river's flowing over this hard rock, and all it is just like over rock and then slot greens, shelves, plunges. Like, it's just full of hard rock bottom features. The substrate's gnarly.
That's cool.
So yeah, I don't think there's any place else that's like, that's all we do.
Right.
And they have other stuff too. I mean, I've looked through it all, and they got some wolves around, they got some peacocks around, they got some other stuff, but main event's Payara, and there's no place else better. So that's the next on the lineup.
And then Nile Perch is going to be a bucket list too.
Boy, I've been talking to the African waters dudes. I want to do that thing so bad. Looks brutal.
Why is it brutal?
I mean, that fish is ginormous. That thing's in some really hard rock stuff too. So they get cut off a lot. Like you can't stop them with the tackle. But yeah, I mean, they're just landing these psychotically giant freshwater fish, and the things that it's a perch. So like, yeah, it's not slow. It just does its thing. But dude, go watch that movie Capitan on YouTube. And I mean, one of their first big ones swims through a tube of rock. And they're like, dude, it's through an underwater tube, but they can see the line on the other side. And they're like, we need this fish. And they got to like cut the backing because it's through an underwater tube, and they're not going to swim through the thing and get eaten by something else, right? And so like they cut the thing, some guy's hand lining it, the other guy runs around, and they retie the fly line to the backing and like keep fighting this thing and land this monster. It's nuts. And the big ones eat at night. So the guys are like, they'll do some spotty fishing. They got some tigers in there. They got some, a bunch of other stuff. They got a couple species of tigers in there and all this stuff, but they like take siestas and like plan for the night. And then they got to walk down there at dusk. And I guess all the hippos are coming out of the river at dusk. So you got to make sure you're not going to freaking cross the hippos when they're coming out of the river and you're going to the river. Like on dry land, fight with those guys. Like, nah, bro, I'm good. And then once you get there, then it's all headlamps. Like you're running headlamps, fishing in pitch black for this like nighttime predator. And then you hook some 200-pound freaking gargantuan perch, and he's just going to tune you up. And you're running over bedrock, and it's running through tunnels. And I mean, it just sounds like mayhem. Sounds like my kind of game.
That's wild. And that's in Cameroon.
That's Cameroon, yeah. Yep. That's the highest on my list of freshwater, probably.
All right, so we've got Jingu as a bucket list for next year.
Yeah, that one's on the marquee. And then the one more in the Amazon, I think, dude, when I was at Piraku, Rafa, the head guy there, man, he was like, you got to hit Ken Jam. And everybody I've heard come home from Ken Jam, it was like, you got to go do it. And that's like the number one variety place in the Amazon. And same thing, it's kind of like it's all clear water. There's a bunch of hard rock. It's not like black tannic, blind casting, and they have like 12 target species. So that's where you go to get the biggest wolves, the biggest barracuda. They got peacocks. They got different species of Paku. I mean, there's just, every single hole is going to be a totally new experience, man. And yeah, I mean, yeah, the guides have been like, that needs to be top of your list. And it sounds super sick. Just a bunch of wade fishing, jumping around on those buckets, on those rocks, finding the buckets, seeing the fish, and be like, okay, new target. You better have a couple rods strung up and be ready for whatever's around the corner. And that's a pretty sweet thing. Lots of these deals are you're looking for one target species, right? Like you go peacock fishing at the Marie, you go Dorado fishing in Bolivia, you got the Paku, Africa, tigers, Jingu, same thing. There's a couple other species, but you're there for Payara. Ken Jam is like full open mind. So that one, I'm pretty keen to go check out that one. That's probably a 2023er. I think that's needs to get done. Just sounds sick, man. Just open mind. Every pool could be a different guy that owns it. Sounds sick.
Yeah, wow. Well, after some of these trips, let's have you back on to talk about it. I always love talking to you about destinations and fish and the experience. Thanks for coming
Anytime, anywhere, brother.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to get this one live. It's always a pleasure, and let's talk to you again soon.
All right, man. Thanks for having me, man.